Welcome back to CFO Weekly, where we're talking with financial leaders about how to build efficiency in their teams, create time for strategy, and ultimately get results. With your host, Megan Weis. Let's jump right in.
Today, my guest is Beatty D'Alessandro. Beatty is a former chief financial officer of 3 industry-leading companies. Until mid-2018, he led finance, accounting, technology, and manufacturing for Merchants Metals, an Atlanta-based carve-out from Oldcastle plc. Merchants is the second largest chain link fence manufacturer in North America and is now owned by private equity investors. In 2015, he retired as the executive vice president and chief financial officer of Univar, a $10 billion global chemical distributor based outside of Chicago. Prior to that, he was the senior vice president and chief financial officer at Graybar, a $5 billion distributor of electrical and data infrastructure products based in St. Louis. Beatty spent a total of 10 years as the CFO of the 2 Fortune 500 companies mentioned above. Beatty was the vice president and chief information officer at Graybar prior to being the CFO there. In that position, he led what was at the time the largest successful SAP enterprise resource planning implementation in a multi-billion-dollar pure distribution company. During this project, he used a number of innovative strategies and newly developed bolt-on software products in order to deliver unique, high-value-adding functionality to the company. Beatty was Graybar's corporate strategist and led their mergers and acquisitions team prior to becoming their CIO. After leaving Graybar's board in 2012 and as one of the company's largest shareholders, Beatty led an unsuccessful attempt to convert the company from its employee-retiree ownership structure. And since retiring from Univar, Beatty has advised private equity investors on over 20 transactions involving companies that distribute chemicals, building products, and industrial products. Beatty has been on the board of directors for Graybar and UMB Bank of St. Louis. Additionally, he served on the large enterprise board of SBC, now AT&T, and the strategic customer board of SAP. He was active in nonprofit and industry organizations as chairman of Make-A-Wish of Missouri, treasurer of Junior Achievement of Missouri, and through board membership at the Deloitte Center for Health Solutions, Missouri-based Baptist Medical Center, Junior Achievement of Chicago, and the University of South Florida College of Business. Beatty has been an executive in residence at Georgia State University's J. Mac Robinson College of Business since 2017. As a member of the faculty, he has taught the financial leadership course in the Masters of Science in Finance program and corporate finance in the EMBA and MBA programs. Beatty holds an MBA and a BA in business with concentrations in finance and marketing from the University of South Florida. Beatty was widowed in 2018 from his wife of 30 years, Kathy, and has 2 grown children. Beatty, thank you very much for joining me on today's episode of CFO Weekly.
It's great to be with you, Megan. It's a pleasure to meet you online.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. And today we'll be talking about the role of the CFO in large public companies, as well as the intersection of finance and technology. And I'm really looking forward to learning from you. So let's jump right in.
Absolutely.
First, and as always, tell us about yourself and your career journey and how it is that you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I'm a 2-time Fortune 500 CFO. I was the CFO at Graybar Electric and at Univar Solutions. And I came to that by early in my career. I was a field finance person, sort of a controller level job at a branch level, and then found my way to corporate office as the treasury manager. Did a bunch of banking and modeling around banking and that job. Then very traditionally got asked to run a region as a CFO for one of our business units. I did that. In that job, the CEO came to me and said, hey, we're going to engage McKinsey. We've got some sort of long-term planning that we need to do, and we need an internal resource, and we'd like you to do that. And so I jumped in this 6-month engagement with McKinsey. We sort of did a top to bottom, soup to nuts review of what the company's opportunities were and how to rank them. And that turned into the job as the corporate strategist, which also included M&A responsibility. And so I did that. While I was in that job, I was asked, we were sort of the internal consulting team. One of the projects we were asked to do was to evaluate the current technology environment that Graybar had in place, which was a home-built ERP, 1980s vintage, And project was kicked off in 2000. So there was a lot of web stuff that was showing up and obviously resonated with the board and the and leadership. And so we did an evaluation. And at the end of that, I did a presentation to the board and I said, our technology is unsatisfactory to our users, unsatisfactory to our customers, and unsatisfactory to our suppliers. So it might be time to do something. And here are three solutions, right? SAP, Oracle, and JD Edwards at the time. And the board came back and said, we agree with you. Thanks for validating it. You seem to know the most about it. Why don't you run the project to implement this new ERP system, pick it, and then run the project to do it, which was, for me, a guy who had spent all of my career in finance, an interesting and strategy, an interesting opportunity to step into some real transformational work. And I did it. I mean, I was happy to do it. And spent almost 4 years in the role. We did this really comprehensive implementation, border to border, coast to coast, first one in pure distribution that had been successfully pulled off. 3 years before, Grainger had a disastrous SAP implementation. They pulled the plug on it. And so there was this attitude that maybe SAP couldn't do distribution, and we proved them wrong. And so we had a business case, 10, 10, and 10, 10% improvement in receivables efficiency, 10% improvement in inventory efficiency, and 10% improvement in employee productivity. And 2 years after implementation, I had to go back to the board and revisit the business case. And we had about an 8% improvement in receivables per sales dollar. We had a 26% improvement in employee productivity.
Wow.
And we had a 45% improvement in inventory productivity. So inventory divided by sales dollars, or sales dollars divided by inventory, 46% improvement. And so the project was a raging success on a financial level. It's a gigantic challenge for on a company-wide basis.
Yeah.
So as it came out of that project, the CEO was retiring. And so she left. She had recommended me for the CFO job. I stepped into that role and then really got an opportunity to optimize all this great software that we had turned on. Did that, was in the running to be the CEO about 8 years later and came in second in that race. And so left the company to run Univar's, to be the CFO at Univar. They were in the middle of a big SAP project. They wanted somebody with prior experience. Did that to completion, also prepped us for an IPO, moved the headquarters from Seattle to Chicago, integrated the biggest merger target or acquisition target we had done in 20 years, and really enjoyed that work living in Chicago. Left that to start my own consulting, where I was helping private equity buy chemical companies and distribution companies, worked on about 25 deals doing that. Relocated from Chicago to Atlanta, and because I could work anywhere in the consulting role, and Georgia State University approached me about coming on to be the executive in residence, which I did part-time, and then my wife passed away of cancer, and I wanted to do something that was less intense, so they said, why don't you become full-time faculty? And I did that. And that's where I land here today with you.
Wow. What an amazing career you've had.
It has been incredibly interesting.
Yeah. So many different roles. So as you look back on all the roles you've had, what would you say have been your favorite experiences and your proudest achievements along the way?
Yeah, I love doing the corporate transformation as a CIO. It was a technology project, but I was driving process improvement and process redesign. And so that was sort of an opportunity to do a bottoms-up remake of the company that basically, when we built our ERP system in the 80s, we paved CalPaths, we took paper order entry tickets, and we turned them into green screens. With SAP, you really can't do that. I mean, they force you to optimize. I wish I could tell you I was the genius behind Graybar's optimization, but it was really the software sort of drove you into doing these more efficient things. But the opportunity to take a $5 billion company and sort of remake it from the inside out, I found that incredibly fulfilling. I also lived through 2008. I was a CFO in 2008. The meltdown came, and I was in a position to manage us through that. And at the end of that, we didn't reduce or skip any dividends. We got through by the skin of our teeth, but we got through without any covenant violations or any issues like that. And so, again, on a professional level, I find that very satisfying. Work at Univar, really taking hold of the move in a headquarters and remaking the entire finance, accounting, HR, legal department in a new city. Again, an opportunity to leave a mark on the company. And I would say along my career is the first 25 years of your career, if you're lucky, you're formed by the organizations that you live with. And if you're really lucky, the last 10 or 15 years, you will form the organization. You will be responsible for changing or modifying what it is. So
that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah. Those aren't what I'm most proud of, though. On an accomplishment basis, I'm most proud that I've got 2 people that work for me that are now CFOs. I think 4 people that are CIOs. I got 4 people that are treasurers, 3 people that are controllers. The folks that worked in my organization and that I helped to do professional development, they're really my legacy, right? Yeah. Because now they're doing it, and hopefully they're doing the same thing as far as training people is concerned.
Yeah, that speaks volumes. I'm curious, as you look back on the ERP implementations, what do you credit the success on? Because so many of those just are over budget, over time frames, and just disastrous projects in general.
Yeah, fear. So
definitely a driving force.
SAP came to us and said, we think we can actually change distribution and use you guys as the model. But you can't force us to take your old screens and your old process and your old system and just duplicate it on SAP because it will fail. You'll never get it built. It'll be just like sort of custom built softwares. And they said, we have a roadmap for successful implementations. And it involves identifying a half dozen things that are really the secret sauce in the organization. And every other process, you just need to conform to something that comes straight out of the box from SAP. And so instead of, trying to figure out your own unique payroll system or your own unique journal entry system or your own unique inventory cash posting situation, you have to just take those right out of the box. And then let's focus on these half dozens, on pricing and on where inventory is and how much inventory you buy and on how you get your rebates from your suppliers. Let's apply energy narrowly in a focused way to these things that are actually unique to Graybar. And that resonated with me. I told that story at every employee meeting that we're going to move everybody's cheese. We're going to change the payroll system. We're going to change the payable system. We're going to change the receivable system. And we're going to do that so we can focus our resources on things like pricing and inventory placement. And there was a huge amount of resistance to that, right? You had people who had been on the job for 35 or 40 years, and they were the experts at cash application. And the thought that at 61 years old, they were going to have to relearn their job, they did not embrace that. In fact, they resisted it in many cases. We had a number of retirements, folks that could retire in some of those really process-driven jobs, they did. And in the end, the 26% improvement in employee productivity, the direct reflection that the software did things in a more efficient way than we had done it, right? Those are the kind of things that made us successful, that we had this focus. Deloitte was our implementation partner. They called them signature processes. And our board was afraid, our CEO was afraid, and I was afraid. And so with that fear in place, we were able to sort of not step on the obvious landmines.
And just taking a look at the role of CFO, how have you seen this role evolve during your career?
It's funny. So I came out of undergrad in '83 and dropped into the business world. And most of the CFOs at the time that I was aware of and that I knew, they were former partners of the Big Eight. And so the role was really heavily weighted toward the accounting field. And the funny thing about the ERP and of all of the implementations around software is most of those in the 80s and 90s were accounting based. And so this need to be the smartest accountant in the company sort of got automated out. I mean, I think there are still 30% of the CFOs in the Fortune 500 are probably have accounting in their background. But the need to be the debits and credits kind of guy or girl, it became not nearly as important. And so you saw these other disciplines, finance and technology and strategy. Those folks all of a sudden ended up on an escalator into those jobs. And you see a lot of finance people and a lot of strategy people and some technology people now that are in these industrial company CFOs. And so the backgrounds are significantly different. And the skill sets they're more strategic and less closing the books kind of focus. And I don't mean to take anything away from my accounting brother, and they serve a key and critical role. But a lot of things that we did on a spreadsheet or in a ledger, if you really go back, we're doing with the press of a key. And if you've got everything set up right, then you can close really quickly. And won't be very many journal entries, and there won't be very many adjusting entries. And so it was really a change around what the skill set that was necessary. So now you need to be able to think about the business, and you really need to be good to think about how you think about risk. And there's all kinds of risks, but the unknown, the uncertainties is, in my mind, sort of the key capability that you need to be successful in a large public company as a CFO.
So for people that are considering becoming a CFO and they're in the traditional path of accounting degrees, big four firms, what skills do you think that they should be focusing on in order to understand the business and the strategic side of things?
Yeah. So, and again, now I'm giving you my speech that I gave, hundreds of times during my career. The first 5 years of your career, whatever it is, if it is accounting, if it is finance, if it is tax, if it is IT, you need to develop a domain expertise. You need to be the person that everybody goes to about the bank swaps that are in place for the company, because that's your narrow world. And nobody's going to get ahead by trying to be the CFO on the first day of the company, the first day they're with a company right out of college. They need to show that they can master whatever it is that they've got, that they have responsibilities for. And accounting, finance, or IT, in my mind, or tax, that doesn't matter. But once you've proven that, then you're going to have the opportunity to manage some people. So you're going to be a player coach. And so, make sure you're a good player coach. Don't be the guy that everybody, or the woman that everybody says, I would never work for that person, or I hated working for that person. This is you actually doing the work along with the folks that are in that group. And so that looks like 3 or 4 or 5 years of managing the area of expertise that you have. And then, you step into, now I have a role where I'm managing my team that did tax, my team that was the controllership, and also the treasury team, and maybe the HR team. Now I have a broader reach. And at that point, you need to develop an expertise, not that you're going to be the expert, but an expertise in how these functions work and how they interrelate. And at that point, clearly you need to have your head up out of your department. And you need to be connecting with the folks in marketing and in manufacturing and in distribution and in purchasing and logistics, so that you're understanding, okay, I'm providing these services, and how do we connect, right? How do I better serve you? And you're asking questions like, if you could get a monthly report or a daily report, what would that report look like? You're trying to anticipate it. You're also trying to teach yourself the business. And so then, again, if you've been successful in that role, it's to step up. And now you're maybe doing something you've never done before. Maybe you're running a department. Maybe you're running manufacturing when you used to be only in finance. I do say this, and I think people sometimes don't understand the opportunities that are in front of them. You have to run toward the sound of gunfire when you're in these jobs. So if their word goes out that we're going to do a restructuring, if word goes out that we're going to do a big acquisition, if word goes out that there's going to be something that's a total one-off, I tell folks that have worked for me and my students, you have to volunteer for those teams, because what you do on a day-to-day basis, it counts for like 75% of advancement. But the 25%, the differentiator is that you're on the restructuring team, and you may just sit in the back row, but you're part of it, and you're in the board meeting or you're in the CEO meeting where the report outs are. And the person, here's the funny thing, the person who's leading that team, the restructuring team, the acquisition team, whatever it is, they're on a fast track to maybe be the CEO or the COO. And so now they get to know you. And so if you're 15 years in and you've never been on a special project, you're in a parking lot. And you need to be asking questions. Whenever you hear that something new and unusual is going on, you need to say, hey, I have a 50-hour-a-week job, but I want to volunteer. I'll work on weekends for the next 4 months because I want to be part of this transformation, right? And that's what these projects are. And that's how you get into the room and get noticed if you want to go from being the head of tax to be the CFO, because you've been involved in those kind of projects, high-profile projects. And I'd say that's also You don't really start with the high profile project. You start with the low profile projects, the stuff nobody wants to do. It's the benefits team when they're rethinking who's going to provide healthcare benefits, and you volunteer to be part of that. And you're in accounting, and nobody thinks that you have any expertise, and you develop it as a result of that. And then your final step to really get to the C-level is you need some luck. The person who's in the CFO job needs to retire or needs to get a better job or needs to become, the CEO or leave the company because there's a traffic jam at the vice president level. And this would be in all the disciplines, right? In manufacturing and in logistics. And you end up with 4 or 5 individuals who are all ready to take the job, all ready, and they're behind someone who's 50. And if that person said, I'm going to stay until I'm 65 here, then you're going to age out. They're going to age out, and you're going to age out with them. And so the luck of somebody leaving or the luck of somebody coming to you from outside of the company or you soliciting from outside of the company, I think I'm a good candidate to be sort of in your queue to be CFO. Those are sort of being lucky enough to get that. And I know I'm rambling, but
no, it's great advice.
The one thing I will tell you is the thought that I am the vice president of finance and I'm in the queue to be a CFO. And what I'll do is I will work with a headhunter and they will get me an equivalent size company CFO job is not likely. Usually you're going to have to transfer at the same level you are if you're a vice president of finance into a similar size company. And the good housekeeping seal of approval is if you become a CFO of a large company, then you can be the CFO in a large company almost. And where you have been has proven your mettle and you are marketable. When you haven't been able to make that step up, you've got to realize if you step over to company B, then either you're going over at the same level, and that is you're going to be a vice president of finance or a vice president controller, and then you're going to be in a new queue where nobody knows you, or you're going to go to a much smaller company as the CFO. And most of us who came out of really large companies, our skill set was in running really large departments. And so to jump into a $1 billion company when you're used to running a $10 billion company and think that it's going to be similar, you're going to be much more of a player coach in that $1 billion company where you're much more of a resource manager in a $10 billion company as CFO. And so you got to be smart and lucky. And I was both. I think I was more lucky. The timing was good.
Yeah, so many CFOs I've spoken to have said like they got to where they were because they took chances and because they jumped at opportunities where they felt uncomfortable. I really think that is key to getting where you want to be, is just to embrace being uncomfortable.
And being broad, right? I mean, the thought that you're going to run a large company as a CFO means you've got to sit on the manufacturing committee team and not the purchasing team. And you've got to teach yourself the important parts of that discipline. And for me, doing the ERP project, right, I was in the guts of the company of all those departments. And so it was sort of an unfair advantage. I saw it all. I knew how it fit together. That was very lucky for me in that the project succeeded. If it hadn't succeeded, then I would have known a lot about processes that didn't work. I don't know how marketable that would have been. But this being uncomfortable, my term is you run toward the sound of gunfire. You're always trying to get yourself where you're stretched. I think is the key attribute of every C-level employee, whether they be in marketing or HR or in finance that I know.
And you touched on this in small versus big companies, but what role do you see the CFO playing in a large public company as compared to smaller non-public companies?
Yeah, so really small companies, you're just the best accountant. And it's almost all controllership, and you do a transaction, a loan or a purchase once every 2 or 3 years. But you're really the guy or the girl who's closing the books and preparing the reports. You get a little bit further up and you're a player coach, right? So you're the treasurer and the CFO, and you might have the controller. You should have the controller working for you. And so it's a little bit, you're a subject matter expert to some degree when you're doing that. But when you're in a really large company, and I'm not talking about a bank or an insurance company, I'm talking about an industrial company, you're going to be the person responsible for sort of what I call risk scoring opportunities. And you're going to be the person that sets the priorities. We've got to close the books on time, got to report to the SEC on time, we've got to provide certifications for SOX and so forth. And you get to decide what number 1 is and what number 10 is in that priority list. You have the resources. You've got the pocketbook where you're going to put these people on that. You're going to say, I need 2 more people in SEC reporting. I need 1 more person in the internal audit. You're doing that resource allocating as well as time, as well as money, as well as people, resources on sort of a very large, on the most general scale. And then finally in that role, you're going to constantly fight the urge to become misaligned from the goals and the strategy of the company. When you're running finance, or when you're the CFO, your goal may be to close the books on time. And so the push is to simplify the way the chart of accounts and to minimize the number of sort of one-off things that you do. And all of that's great for you. But what if the company needs 2 sets of chart of accounts or 3 sets of charts of accounts? And you're losing alignment in that you're doing what's best for you, but you're not doing what is best for supporting the company. And I would tell you, it's surprising, but that drift toward chaos, or that drift into self-serving strategies, is a really big problem among financial executives. Doing what's best for me versus doing what's best for the company, and dealing with the efforts that come with that complexity.
So how would you suggest avoiding that? How do you do what's best for the company rather than yourself, and make sure that you're always doing that?
Yeah, if you don't have a hand-in-glove relationship with your CEO and your senior leadership team, but really with your CEO, who is charged with being the visionary at the top of the stack, and if that isn't not only cordial but friendly and aligned, and you finish each other's sentences, then you should be working on that, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't really get to decide what the overall strategy of the company is. You may have a vote, you may have some say-so, but at the end of the day, the board and the CEO are going to sort of from on high tell you, here's what we're going to do. We're going to open in Mexico and we're going to close in Canada. And your job as the CFO is to do that in a way that is the most efficient and the most beneficial for the owners and stockholders of the company and the other stakeholders for the company. I think that the really short answer is it's not just being political with the CEO. You really have to develop a relationship with the CEO. You have to believe that they're doing the right things and that they're going in the right direction. And the danger always is in that is if the CEO drives the company into the ditch, you're going with them, right? But I would tell you, the thought that the CEO is going to go before the CFO goes in a situation where things are really bad, it doesn't really work that way. Usually they fire the CFO before they get to the CEO. And so you better create that linkage and that alignment and that friendship and that alliance with the person who has ultimate responsibility for running the company.
And let's talk about the concept of risk score opportunity. What exactly is this, and how should a CFO be thinking about leveraging it?
Yeah, so you're sitting in a strategy meeting or a board meeting and somebody says, hey, I hear there's a great opportunity in Brazil. And, we can get in there with an acquisition and it can be the next great thing for the company. And the CFO's job is to be dispassionate and come back and say, well, the data shows that there are 18 competitors in our space down there. Acquisitions are trading at, 17 times earnings, which is, we're trading at 12. So it's going to be a negative carry for us. And the last 2 people that have bought into Brazil, American companies that have bought into Brazil, have been, one exited after 5 years and the other is still struggling after 8 years. And so maybe that's not the greatest idea. Maybe that's not the best use of our money and our talents. And that's an advisory role, right? Because typically if it's the CEO that's decided to go to Brazil, you're going to go to Brazil. Hopefully the conversation, those elements that I just described to you, you would have with the CEO one-on-one and say, here's the reasons I think this is problematic. You're scoring it. You're saying the likelihood of this of us being successful in Brazil is 1 in 10, right? Let's go find a 1 in 5, or let's go find a 1 in 4 and apply our time and our resources there. And that's that scoring process. And it's all very data driven. It's others have gone, have they succeeded? How long have they taken? What are the multiples in order to get in? What are the time frames? And those are things that it's supposed to be somewhat second nature for a CFO. I think you develop it over time because you are in the middle of a lot of transactions, whether it's capital expenditures, you're buying plants and property and new equipment, or you're buying companies as you get further up the chain in your career. And so you've seen a lot of things and you've seen a lot of business cases and a lot of projections. and you've seen them when they haven't worked out. And so the zeal for the deal, right, to throw yourself into something and you're going to make it work when 9 out of 10 times it doesn't work. Sometimes it sounds like the naysayer. I would say in large meetings, I tried to never be the naysayer. In small meetings with the CEO or the board, I could be very negative about opportunities, but always data driven. It was never just to say, we shouldn't do this because I say so. And in many cases, I didn't know. I didn't know whether I thought going to Brazil was a good idea or not until I pulled the experts, right? So I pulled the experts. So that's sort of the risk scoring, the way I viewed it. You're going to see in that job, you're going to see lots of opportunities are going to come. Buying companies, buying property, buying assets that come your way all the time. And you need to have methodologies to evaluate those and say, these are the top 2 that we should do this year, and these are the ones we should do next year, and these are the ones that should go on a back burner in order to keep the company focused on its long-term objective of, creating value.
And I'm just curious, when something's failing, what's kind of your rule of thumb for when you walk away? When do you pull the plug?
It's easy to go on either side of what the right answer is on that. It's easy to say a year in, this is a disaster, let's cut our losses and walk away. And almost as easy at the 5 years and you haven't met your projections to say, well, let's give it another year. And so for me, and this was the discipline we brought to the ERP project, and the discipline we had it both at Graybar and at Univar, was we had a business case that we started with. And every 6 months, we would go revisit the business case. And when you're building something, it was, okay, we said it was going to cost $25 million, and so far we've spent $28 million. Obviously, our cost estimates were wrong. So now it's built, and it's a $30 million on what was supposed to be a $25 million. So now you got to rebuild your business case about how it's going to pay off. And when you get 3 years into something and you're 50% below your business case, you're never going to catch up. And maybe it's 30%, you're never going to catch up. And so then you have to say, is it a crappy success? If, let's say, we only got 70% of what we thought we had, but that still isn't, it's still in the money, and it's not really at our threshold or our hurdle rate, but it's close. And if we give it some more time, maybe we'll be at our hurdle rate. But if you say, it's never going to meet our criteria as a successful investment, which is what the business case is built on, at that point, you really have to say, it was a great idea, and the execution was pretty good, and the thesis on this was wrong. There wasn't that much market. There wasn't that much opportunity. And you generally, then you go try to find somebody to buy it if you can, and say, there's got to be an expert out there that's great at Brazilian fertilizer. Let's go find somebody who really has been good at it and sell them the business.
And as a CFO who's obviously representing lots of stakeholders, how is it that you set priorities both for yourself and for the company as a whole?
Yeah. So as you get into these C-level jobs, the idea behind the pay packages typically is to create an alignment between the success of the company and the success of the individual. And there's a lot of negative press about what the large company CEOs and in some cases CFOs make. But almost always their base salary is X, and their long-term comp that's driven by the value of the stock is 20X. And as long as they are pushing the valuation of the company forward, then, and they are enjoying the benefit of that increase in valuation, then you have this alignment between the shareholders, the people who gave you their money, and your own personal interests. And so that alignment piece, which is the theory today and the theory I grew up in, is that's a compensation conversation. It's an auction and the restricted stock grant kind of conversation to maintain that stockholder C-suite alignment. You have others, I would say, and it's never everybody's first list, but for me, then the next group were the regulators, whether it was the IRS or the SEC or the state revenue agencies. If you didn't serve them in the way they wanted to be served, that is filing on time and sending checks on time, you weren't going to be in business very long. And so sort of the death threats are, if your shareholders think that you're destroying value, you're fired. If the IRS or the SEC thinks that you're not abiding by the rules, you're fired. And so you're managing those two constituencies sort of top of mind on almost equally, I would tell you, in the chair. And then you have your employees, and if you don't have good employees, the quality of the work that gets done is not going to get done. And so, a fair environment where competency is rewarded and where the company is viewed as a fair player is really, really, really important. And next, I'd fall into sort of the customer. The customers have to view what you do as valuable. They have to say, I couldn't do this myself, and so I have to hire an expert. And these experts really do it they do it well, they do it as expected, they do it the way I would like. Below them are a bunch of suppliers where you're dealing with folks who are providing you with resources in order to do the work that's necessary in order to create value. And then sort of harder to define and not sure how you would measure your success in this is your community involvement. And we did at Graybar, we were very involved in junior achievement. And so we were measuring the number of hours that we were contributing to school systems around the area. And I think it has to be something quantifiable. If you say my impact on the community is people like me, I don't quite know how to quantify that. But if I say, we put 27,000 hours into the public school system in the greater St. Louis area over the last 2 years, and our target is to do 32,000 in the next 2 years, then I would say, well, that's something you can actually wrap your head around. And hopefully you've been insightful in your picking of whatever this is, this endeavor that you're going to do, and that it's going to have some sort of a benefit on the overall community. But these really specific community goals or non-specific community goals, I don't know how you won. I don't know how you moved the ball if that's not something that you can wrap something data-driven and quantifiable around. And we loved that, we had 500 employees that were in the public school systems every year. And we thought, we're selling the company brand, we're creating future recruits, we're helping out with the education process, and we're teaching the benefit of free enterprise. We thought it was win, 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 win all over the place for us. I'm afraid that kind of really measurable and quantifiable involvement doesn't meet maybe some of the more generalized, you've got to be a good corporate citizen, which I don't know what that means besides I pay my taxes and I don't break the law. Good corporate citizen that gets bandied about as some measure of your success and community involvement. So those would be the constituents and sort of the way I would stack them.
And let's talk about resources. So resources are finite, obviously, and they seem to be becoming more and more finite as the years go by. But the uses for those resources are always infinite. So as a CFO, how do you ensure that you're both providing the right resources and then allocating them in a way to maximize their return?
Right. It's an excellent question and hard to know until you're looking in the rearview mirror whether you did it right. Resourcing to me is time, money, and people. And maybe to some degree attention, but the priorities sort of set the attention, right? They set, we're going to focus on getting into the South American market. That's going to be our priority. And then you model, right? I mean, that's unfortunately, it's not sexy, but you build these models, these return on capital models, these business cases. If we do this, we should get that. You compare it to the general business. So right now, our EBITDA ratio on the base business is 8%. And here's an opportunity. And if everything works, it'll be 14%. That seems like a good idea. Now you have to score it, right? You say the probability of us building a business that returns 14% in South America is 1 in 3. Well, so now you have to risk adjust whether that works. Anyway, so you're looking at this opportunity menu of things that you could do with the business, including invest in your core business that you already have, add more salespeople, more manufacturing environments, more delivery nodes, versus go buy something, go do a greenfield expansion, go into a different country. And then you score it and you decide whether this is highly likely and this is not very likely. We're not paid, CFOs are not paid only to do sure things. We have to pick things that are unlikely but high impact occasionally, because those are the things that are going to make the big difference 5 years from now. And so if every decision we make is playing defense, which sometimes you do in 2008, every decision was playing defense. But in the normal course, if what you're looking at is this is not going to have a great effect in year 1 or year 2 or year 3, but in year 4 or 5, this is going to be a core business for us. There's only a 25% chance that it's going to work out. But if it works out, it's going to really be transformational. Then those are the things that you want to resource, right? You want to apply time, money, and people to in order to make that happen. And so that's sort of the priority feeds the resource model, right? And you've got to have the priorities in order to make the resourcing decisions.
And let's switch gears for a bit and talk about the intersection of finance and technology. So when you look at technology, what do you feel like CFOs should be prioritizing as far as investments in their technology stacks right now?
Yeah, I'd like to say, because it's very popular at the moment, that it's all AI investments. I think AI is going to be the co-pilot to a lot of executive decision-making. I don't think we're going to turn all of our decisions over to machine learning to make. And so there's an element of AI and what CFOs should be thinking about. But for me, the technology is about driving the speed that you have insight, right? And so these are quick closes and these are granular level reporting on a product or a location so that you can do something before it's way off course, right? And the story that we would tell always throughout late in my career was the Korean Airlines 007. He's in Anchorage, the pilot's in Anchorage, and he missets the compass by 1 degree. He missets the compass by 1 degree. He flies off, he flies into the Soviet Union, and he gets shot down. 1 degree over 3,000 miles, that's a big problem. And so we were looking to make that when we saw 1 degree, to be able to sense a 1 degree deviation from the plan or a 2 degree deviation from the plan, that we could begin to remediate, right? We could begin to make the appropriate adjustments. And so technology provides that insight at speed, right? The tempo of business is faster because of technology, because systems exist that are capturing transactions, sorting them in a way that you can understand, and spitting out a report to you that's going to drive your insight. Now, the interesting thing is you're going to take that report and you're going to dump it into AI and it's going to say, here are the 3 things you should consider based on the report. That's helpful. Now I can make more decisions faster because I have something that's doing sorting for me. But at the end of the day, it's this ability to detect very small variations very early. That is what's exciting to me about the technology that's in place today and that is being rolled out today in large organizations.
And of course, technology is important, but not always the magic bullet I think some people hope it will be. So what other changes does a company have to undergo to make the most of its technology?
Well, it has to be open-minded as it looks at its technology, as it looks at its technology portfolio. I think there's the tendency not to view a technology investment as a sunk cost. In many instances, you've bought it, you've put it on, you've got it up and running, everybody's focused on solving the Y2K problem. And 2 years after all those investments are made, all of this web-enabled technology showed up. And the typical response of the CFO and those who have responsible for return on investment is, well, no, we got to get another 7 years out of what we've invested in. It doesn't matter what's going on in the environment. And the answer is, it does matter what's going on in the environment. If you're building a data center and all of a sudden Amazon Web Services knocks on your door and says, we can take over your entire data center work and do it for less than you're doing, then sort of mid-project, you need to be able to say, gee, that didn't exist. Now it does exist. I need to stop and rethink all of my assumptions based on this new fact. I would tell you that's really hard. It fights sort of everything you have in you that it is driven by momentum, that once you get something started and you've gone through all the effort of getting it approved, that you would see it to the end. If things change markedly enough, you need to stop and you need to reconsider and you need to redirect. And this again is getting to sort of this granular view of the business in real time or nearly real time, being able to read that, pull out the insight from that, and then make informed decisions based on what is actually happening. And to me, that's exciting because the speed of business is so much faster than it was when I started, when it would take us 20 days to close the books. And at Graybar, we were closing the books in 3.5 days. At Univar, we were closing it in 4 days. I mean, just so much faster. And all the reports were automatically generated off of those really capable systems. And so we could get away from planning washing the dishes, closing the books, and get into planning the menu. What do we do with this, right? How do we react to sales are down in Montana, right? I mean, what do you do about that? That's the fun of the business, not trying to figure out why the books didn't balance right and on these accounts.
Yeah, I don't think many people want to spend much time looking at historical things. I think most people would rather be looking ahead and thinking strategically.
The historical stuff provides you with the trends. And always in the C-level, you should be working to break the trend. The trend is 6% up. And so what can I do to get to 7.5%? What can I get to do to get 8%? Because if we do nothing, it's going to follow that trend. And if you do nothing, why do you need high-paid executives? Why, right? High-paid executives are supposed to be the ones that are the pathfinders, finding the next way forward that's going to move the business from a 6% return on a bit to return to an 8% return, right? That's what you're paying executive management to do, not to do the same old thing.
And as you look at technology, how do you feel it can help to drive uniformity of processes and increase controls?
Yeah. Well, so anybody on the control side, anybody who's been through a Sarbanes-Oxley implementation, and I've been through two, will tell you without systems, you cannot provide the assurances that your accounting firm is going to require in order to give you a clean opinion. And that is that the system really has to be the system of record for the company. It can't be something that's dumped into from some Excel spreadsheet and an Access database and some SQL Server database. It has to be the hub in the middle of the business. And the uniformity is you create these transaction types. And what you should do is you should be creating an optimum transaction type, whether it's an order entry or applying cash or paying suppliers or ordering materials or whatever it is. And then you drive to that optimized approach. And so you're in 300 places. Now everybody is going to do order entry the same. And so every report is going to be a real version, a comparable version between locations, products, places, whatever it is. And that uniformity, I would tell you, it's interesting. In sort of the 90s, every meeting started with an argument about this report is not accurate, right? You did it this way. You ran it on a Tuesday before 4 o'clock, and that's when we load the final adjustments every week. And there'd be all this argument. You'd go to an hour meeting, and it would be 45 minutes arguing about the methodology, and maybe 10 minutes about arguing about what we should do about it. And when these systems came in and you were in these uniformed approach and we were doing ordering the same, we were doing cash app the same, we were closing the books the same, journal entries the same, we went from 5 minutes to talk about the methodology to get the reports together. Oh yeah, that's the monthly report, or that's the weekly report, or that's the daily report. Nobody argued about that. And then you'd have 50 minutes of insightful discussion about what to do about it. What does it mean? And now how do we respond to that? And I would tell you, it took a bunch of management time that was burned up in cycles about arguing whether Tuesday morning report were the same as Tuesday afternoon reports. And okay, we've obviously got a problem in Denver. We need to do something about it. And now your speed, this is again sort of the granular the level